These are follow-on parts of part 1 of the video series which explore the need for and how to become global corporate academics, spirit beings who are at the top of the games in research, teaching and learning, and impart academia, public services, industry sectors, and wider society, far better than traditional academics.
In part 2 of this workshop, we are going to look at the mechanisms that can enable knowledge workers to master those riot skills, to master the skills of research, integration of knowledge, applications, and teaching. So the basic question asked is how can those workers master these skills in a way that can, enable them to have profound impact? Yes, profound impact on wealth creation, job creation across the academia, industry, government, and wider society. That's the key question. I'll recognize Professor Henry once we've come to a stage in the part. Okay, so that's the part we want to deal with now, and we need to cover basically some of the tools that can enable us to do research that is, to my view, better organized than the ones we are tending to copy most of the time. And that is what we call the research methods canvas. For the teaching aspects, we need to look at signature pedagogies and their links with curriculum innovations. In order to look at applications, for instance, we need to, in terms of integration of knowledge, we need to be able to have some kind of experience 7 E's of education and human development. We need to understand the 5 minds to the future and the entire process of knowledge integration itself. How does it happen? Then we look at applications, we talk about labs, deep practices that would maintain our currency in ability to, use concepts and ideas that we've studied in problem solving. Having consultancy units, running master classes on these techniques. And after that, we also look again at interactive discussions by our facilitators and all of us, as we did in part 1. And then, of course, at the end of that, we bring it together in a plenary session again. So let me just quickly lay down these constructs before we go into the discussion. So I will again try to reserve enough time for the discussions themselves. The idea of a research methods canvas, which I'm going to show later on, maybe close to the plenary, it focuses on having a deeper understanding of the structures that can enable us to do a review of existing studies, our literature review, thematically. So when we frame a question, if we frame our research objectives or questions, we make sure that we understand the constructs, the technical constructs that are coming into each question, and we must ensure that we look at literature that deals with those constructs in their totality. So let's say we have about 3 research questions, and there are maybe 2 main constructs in one, 3 main constructs in the other, and 1 major construct in the third one. It means we have 6 key constructs to play with in erecting pillars that can support the entire research process effectively. And when we are looking at those, the literature review that covers those questions and objectives and our aim, we make sure we take it in a kind of continuum where we look at previous research that may not be too recent but are seminal. That is the extant knowledge we're playing with. Then we look at the current, the most very recent suite of techniques, ideas. And then we look at the most current, what is happening now. In that, and each time we are looking at this, we are also looking at covering those themes so that we can see the teleology from the beginning of a knowledge idea to how it morphs with different meanings and how it's applied over the years, how it is extended by other scholars, and the nature of contestations that come with it, by which I mean debates by scholars. For what reason they're debating what? Do we really agree with what they're debating about? how do we use the insights from those contestations to close the gaps that our own research is about, to recall Professor Sholare's mentioning of the gaps. Then we also then make sure we are so current that we are the cutting edge, meaning that if this research is happening now, we need to have some 21 references around it. Then maybe about 3 years back, 4 years, depending on how fast knowledge moves in the field. The important thing is that to be at the cutting edge, to be able to say, because of this research being advanced, we are at the cutting edge, what is going on in that place. We understand what is going on in this field now. And by doing so, which are the key dominant paradigms and theories and hypotheses that have been explored? How do we use those to construct our own frames of reference, our own conceptual frameworks? In mathematical sciences, we call them theoretical frameworks. In the social sciences and humanities, we normally call them conceptual frameworks. But these are also used interchangeably, irrespective of field. And in that case, we now say, okay, what are the gaps in learning, the gaps in the research, in the field? And then how do we close the gaps, in the sense that the gaps are linked to what we are studying, or we can go backwards to now reframe the starting objectives and questions to be able to focus on the key gaps we think we're working on, things like that. And once we now got a firm set of questions, research questions, we are now in a position now to now begin to structure the methodology, to go into the field, collect the data, do the analysis and findings, and so on and so forth. We are more interested in, because these are normal things that we do well enough, where I'm interested in is where we are actually lacking that capacity to extend what is currently existing. Okay, is everybody seeing this canvas now, please?
Yes.
Good. All this that I've said now is talking about the fact that when we start with research, we move, first of all, in a kind of forward loop, which is this. So what I'm saying is, we normally go through a forward loop, isn't it? Because initially we are not pretending that when we are solving a problem, we don't have initial ideas about what we are looking for. We do. So normally you start with your problem solve, why are you solving it? For instance, the problem studied and why. You draft your initial aim, objective, keyword research, objectives, some keywords, expected contribution to knowledge. You then go into the previous literature, which just I talked about, what has happened before. You break it down into themes that wrap around the concepts or constructs you've already identified in the objectives and questions. You move into the current literature now, what is happening now or recently. Each time, you're again taking it in those themes. And then you also make sure your voice as a researcher is always there. You're not just copying people's views and aligning them as your literature review. You are actively interrogating those ideas in terms of what you are doing yourself. And eventually you are the cutting edge, which is that arrow. The cutting edge is saying, okay, I am an advanced researcher in this field, therefore I know these things. I know that these are the main things happening in this field, and therefore the next thing is the gaps in knowledge, what needs to happen more. Again, you interrogate that, you look at your gaps. Let's say you have about 15 gaps you noticed from previous work. It's not likely you're going to work on all the 15 gaps. You can look at the key gaps that connect other gaps. Let's say there are 3 of them. Those 3 will then inform a second look at your objectives. So you go back on what is called a backward loop, which is the arrow going backwards, to go and reframe those objectives. Then you have a new set of objectives now, research questions, and then you start making progress. You then come down to methodology, the same, everything then happens. But let me home in on this. Let me home in on this. In traditional research as happens in universities, most of the times they are talking about theory, research, and practice. They do the theory well enough, the research well enough, the practice not too well, because they normally say recommendations for practice, recommendations for policymakers. They don't get involved in implementing the recommendations. They are finished because it already gives them publications, they move on. And that is why we are where we are. We do not implement the recommendations or facilitate the implementation ourselves. We don't. It is up to us, therefore, in a new paradigm, to take the whole thing beyond those 3 elements, which are the same three elements on which the journal rankings are traditionally based, to go into more ramified set of criteria, 7 of them now, in what I call the ladder of contributions to knowledge. The theoretical contributions, which covers the other one, the links with conceptual theoretical framework, which is to show really how those gaps have been closed. The novelty in the results, the model building beyond the theory, which means beyond theory, research, and practice. Did you create a mechanism, a framework, whatever, a tool for actually driving those implementations and recommending? Otherwise, everybody is recommending something to be done. Who is going to do those things? Is it the government itself that don't really understand what you're doing, will come and recommend it and implement it? No. That is why we're not taking charge of our future. Then the 5th one will be prescience, how it changes the field. To achieve prescience, you need to be deeply multidisciplinary, because most of the new ideas come from the confluence of disciplines. Majority of the work published in the traditional way are not prescient. They just, replay what has happened elsewhere in any geographical environment, or change a few things, or just take one gap and do something, say, oh, a new result has been found. They are rarely prescient. If you look at the prescient results, they come from a combination of disciplines. The Einstein theory, for instance, the relativity theory, the people that came through with the DNA, it's a combination of a lot of, processes and thinking in modern biology, for instance. Now, we need to also think about methodological novelty. Have we come up with better methods that actually do this problem better in our own context, linking up with the cultural sensitivity of our work that Professor Henry talked about, linking up with the profound changes that Dr. Adibolo talked about? Are we doing all these things? We are not. Do you see how, by not re-architecting the criteria for excellence and rankings on 7 pillars, by living and dying on only the 3 that are not really properly done, that is the crux of the problem we have in Africa today. That is why those academics can publish thousands and thousands of papers. Their African problems as where they are, because we are not going beyond those things. We are not doing the real practice, the real model building. That's what I wanted to say. The other thing I want to emphasize in this is the need to make sure that your literature review is so deep that you can create a conceptual or framework or theoretical framework that is at the heart of the entire process. You can see that a big arrow is joining up your literature to that conceptual framework, so that if I'm working maybe in mathematical biology, for instance, okay, my PhD was in mathematical biology, of course, using stochastic models. Have I done enough literature in that area to be able to say that my map or conceptual framework contains the dominant paradigms and theories that are actually being explored in my work, and that I know the gaps between the current frameworks and what I want to achieve, so that by the time I finish my work, I can come back and modify that particular framework to become my own framework that rests on other things and shows the linkage between my work and the dominant work in the area. This is what we also are not doing well. Once we get enough number of publications, supervisor and student are convinced that the external examiner will come and be impressed and pass the PhD, we are done. This is why majority of the time the PhDs are just there in shelves. A few publications from them in journals, and end of story. You take the guy outside the university, give him a problem in his field, he's looking up and down, not knowing where to start. Because the depth of this thing he did, that is called a PhD thesis, does not grapple with the realities of real problem solving as in the ladder of contribution to knowledge. And this answers the question Professor Sholare was saying, that we need to re-architect these things and own them in Africa, in developing countries. And you'll be surprised that if we do this well enough, the same people we are copying will come and start saying, why are these people developing so fast? They will come back again to borrow this as recipes from us. I am convinced that this will happen. So this is what I wanted to contribute on this. I just want to go back to my original presentation by doing a new share. So I go back to where I was before. I just wanted to share that with you for now. I have shown us the research methods canvas, isn't it? But because we are talking about research, I've covered that in the canvas, okay? We need to talk about integration of knowledge. We need to talk about the applications and teaching. They're all interwoven, but let me talk about teaching now because it's normally proximate with the research before I go into applications and things quickly. Now, if you look at what the way I'm looking at teaching, there are 5 key teaching formats which we explored in the October workshop. And that is the lecture, the normal 1 hour lecture or 2 hours lecture that a lecturer gives, standing in front of the class most of the time and rattling out the concept, and students are just copying and asking a few questions. Of course, that's later on reinforced with tutorials. There is then question and answer, of course. There is also some case studies. There is some kind of group work and others. So those form the normal 5 teaching formats: simulations and case studies and case stories, and so on and so forth. The point I am making today is that it's not enough. It's not enough to do just these 5 formats over and over again. There's nothing new we're adding if we are insisting on these 5 formats. Yes, they deliver it. They deliver the core thing to the student. But there are another 15 pedagogical systems which are called signature pedagogies that we must master. I'm not bothering to list all of them. I just count them off, some of them. There's what we call deliberate practice. Deliberate practice is the pedagogical system that is used to train elite sportsmen and women. So if you are looking at the system that happens maybe in sports academies, the system that teaches the likes of coaches the likes of Okocha of Nigeria, Messi, Lionel Messi, Ronaldo, and so on and so forth, right from even the days of Pele, the system that coaches them to be stars. The same system that is used to coach the tennis stars, the Roger Federers of the world, the Nadals, the Serena Williams, the Sharapovas, this system of deliberate practice for coaching experts, phenomenally prodigious, call them that, sportsmen and women who call celebrities, elite, that system has to come into the university. Because if you are a mathematician, that is your own tennis. But nobody's bothering to teach it at a level. Nobody's trying to use those methods in those serious academies to teach you mathematics. You just learn the mathematics, okay, fair enough. What do you know what it means for us to be able to use that system, additional to the 5 formats, to coach mathematical scientists on how to be the best they can be and how to apply mathematical knowledge across the Cure Helix? Don't you feel that a lot is missing? Because we are not looking outside the 5 formats. Another one is called CD, Creative Dialogue. Creative Dialogue is a system where you suspend judgment and move into critical thinking and design questions and assessments that can enable students and learners to begin to interrogate their inner understanding of a field and start asking serious questions, almost in a Socratic style, that system where nothing is seen as wrong or right initially, so that the student comes up with original thinking, is called creative dialogue. How many times do we do it in the 4 walls of traditional universities? Except maybe in areas like strategy and business and management. Does it happen in mathematics so much? It may. I'm not discounting it. In statistics, not the way I know it before. Even myself wasn't doing it, to be honest, until I learned it through my exertions to understand pedagogy. But you can see the power of bringing those things in. The other one is what is called mastermind method, accelerated learning techniques, where you use what is called the master key to teach a field. Like if you want to teach a concept in a field, whether it's mathematics or history, you talk about M for motivation, real life examples to motivate the topic, which is what Sholari and all of us have mentioned. That is happening. A for acquiring information, debating with students the nature of information, because sometimes a student is looking at a question, he does not even understand the material nature of information in the question, the information given, the information required to be produced. They may do accurate calculations, end up not framing the answer in the way that was asked. Okay, if for instance you say you use a ratio to share something, you say, okay, tell me eventually how many apples that Susan got. The student stops at saying ratio 2 to 3. The question of that of Susan was no longer asked because the student was not coached on being mindful of the information, the structure of information in the learning process. Then, of course, the S is the searching for meanings of concepts. Every concept must be taken apart if you want a student to be a master of the game. I know we can do that. We are doing that because most of the assessments are around concepts. But we need to do better than that. T is triggering their memory. How do you enable them to remember stuff? Sometimes, can you create a little bit of, apart from mnemonics, a little bit of music, a little bit of, a little song, so that if they can sing that song, that particular technique will flash to their minds immediately. I'll give a simple example. If you are differentiating, for instance, a quotient function in mathematics, U over V, it is the denominator multiplied by the differential coefficient of the numerator. You subtract the other way around, the numerator multiplied by that of the denominator, divided by the denominator squared. If a student is struggling to remember this in A level, how do I teach it? I will say, den duk num ba num duk den over den squared. A little music, a little song, that automatically captures that formula for the student. These are the little things we need to talk about. There are so many other pedagogies, so many, up to 15 more. Another one is the one that is used in training military people. All those people that are in West Point, these people that go to Sandhurst, the training they get and the strategic intelligence that can be used right in there in the class. You only need to adapt it in your own field. Are we doing that? No, because we are sticking to the traditional thing we know all along. This is why when they do all these things in their own class, their people prosper, our own people don't prosper. We are not actually catching up because we don't understand this nature of pedagogies and how they can be used in innovating curriculum. This is why, to me, to be honest, if you ask me today, if it were possible for me, the university that my children will go will be the one I build. But of course, I have money to build one and they've graduated. It's the one I build because it is the best that I'll make sure that happens. If you want to teach somebody mechanical engineering, why do you go and spend 2 hours teaching about a spanner? When you can come, bring the student, get a car that is pretending to be stalled, open the bonnet, use the spanner there to start losing something, the student has already understood the spanner. Because that is in situ in the problem situation. But to first of all come and do glorified theories first, they will come to lab, and then sometimes there's a disconnect between what we tell them in the class and what maybe the younger academic leading them in lab is telling them. But if everybody came together around a bonnet of a car, lift the bonnet, and everything about the theory and the practice of the spanner is taught there, nobody will forget it. This is the medical education model. Are we applying it to history? Are we applying it to mathematics? Because if you come to the educational model, Harry can confirm, you make sure that the consultants are going on ward round with the learners, the younger medics and nurses, and showing them things, interrogating patients. They are seeing it happen. That is the medical model. It has to be spread over every other discipline. Of course, adapted in terms of the nuances. Are we doing that? These are the issues. So many pedagogies are not being used because we have refused to innovate things. That's what I can say about that one. In terms of applications, I don't want to waste too much time about that because we know the concept of labs. But the only thing I can say is that who tells us that there can be a lab in history? Every discipline in the world, just like Professor Larry said, must have a lab. A history lab, for instance, can involve the use of history with a bit of, sociology and philosophy to resolve conflict in society, conflict resolution. Historians can take us back to, when this thing happened, Emperor so and so got it wrong because of this. The historical knowledge can begin to conjure solutions to that conflict by referring people to past events. So you must create a lab for history. If I were to build a university today, history must have a lab. So that it's not that they just read about story, Mansa Kanka Musa, Emperor this, Emperor that. Without bringing them together in a lab where they can begin to use the historical knowledge to solve historical problems that connect with society. The same thing with consultancy units. All of them must have every discipline must have consultancy unit. Of course, the medical sciences, the microbiology, but they have their labs. We know. But what about statistics? Yes, we need to do labs, and that is the consultancy. By doing consultancy on statistical models and analysis of data, like Sholari has shared, like I normally do. Today, my main work actually is my own consultancy in statistics, which is called Sigma Z. I just changed the X that I used when I was teaching in 1992-93 in Unizik to Z, now that I'm in UK, and it's called Sigma Z Analytics. Everything in statistical consulting is there. Research, or even up to PhD level. And that is what makes it easier for me to come into anywhere and render statistics the best possible way with myriad examples that students can relate to it. And that is important. And we do master classes. Somebody like Dr. Ojo can come in one day and say, students, no class today, we're doing master class. I want to take you through the tapestry of quantitative geography from beginning to end, 2 hours, 3 hours, with occasional breaks. The students will come up saying, hi, so this is the depth of geography. How are we doing those things? We just teach the standard 1 hour and go. Are we really thinking about the architecture of knowledge itself, the archaeology of knowledge, and how to reorganize stuff to make us more effective? These are my worries. Okay, I want us to go now into interactive discussions. I want to yield the floor. Thank you so much.
Okay, yes. Okay. Thank you very much, Pat, for
okay.
Thank you very much. You can hear
yes.
The siren in the background.
Okay.
I'm in a moving vehicle.
Yes, it's true. No problem.
Let me just put my contribution before the network cuts me out.
Okay.
Actually,
okay.
I just want to illustrate again this issue of the first example I gave. I was talking about the statistics, and it will appear, oh yes, anybody can teach statistics using data from at the University of Lagos. Yeah. I taught group theory at the master's level.
Yeah.
To teach the course. I came into the class with the Rubik Cube. I'm sure we all know the Rubik Cube.
Oh, yes, it's true.
Yes. I mean, it's a game, and everybody, but it is the basis of Rubik Cube is group theory.
It's true.
And that is what we used in teaching, and we're using. I mean, throughout the program, every theorem, everything they were developing, it from the Rubik Cube.
Yes.
So that is, and as abstract as group theory is, they could see that it has to do with the real world. So
it's true.
That's my contribution.
Thank you so much, Prof. Because this thing, I want to share with us that you use this same Rubik Cube where you appointed me a visiting professor 2009 at NMC. You use this Rubik Cube to be training gifted children and university students about how to think in a way that uses algebraic systems. And it was amazing to me because that is not my field. But I began to enjoy that field. I usually thought it's not applicable, but after that, I just went back to my hotel room and said, what? And this is what I'm talking about. Every single discipline has enough applications, but we need to do something to get into those applications. We need to do more work, bring in more resources, bring in more tools. And that is why we can innovate those things. Thanks so much for that contribution. Any other person on this? Dr. Adibola wants to say something on this, please.
Yes, thank you very much. Very interesting takes there. And I completely agree. I think with that notion, I think the point you made, which hits home very well, Professor Ezekwe, is the need for us to be flexible in terms of our appreciation and incorporation of pedagogy, recognizing that problems, real world problems, are not necessarily compartmentalized into singular disciplines. Neither are they compartmentalized into singular pedagogies. It's a very, very important point. And I know you've mentioned a few pedagogic approaches, which I also embrace. And, within our discipline, for instance, we take a lot of within the classroom learning into the real world. So we take things outside the classroom. So our pedagogies need to be much more student-centered and real world centered. So real world centered.
Yes.
At the same time, I think embracing various approaches that reflect personalized learning needs of students.
Yeah.
Approaches that support synchronous and asynchronous learning activities as well. And I know that Prof. Sholarin talked about gamification, which is the use of gaming techniques to support pedagogical thinking and to encourage and motivate activities, especially those that are relevant to learning, online worlds, for instance.
It's true.
And of course, I think COVID-19 has invoked the requirement for blended learning approaches, mix of physical and real world interaction, complemented by e-learning, hybrid approaches to learning. All these approaches help to excite the curiosity of learners, introducing them to elements of flexibility beyond their traditional boundaries. So thank you so much. Those are just a few points that I wanted to add.
Thank you so much. You've excited something. I just want to mention, I'm coming back to that later, that when you talked about personalized learning, the reason it touched me again is those things I mentioned about user-centered research. But when we, for instance, do a kind of a quick survey interview and then get a kind of personas of the students we are teaching in a particular field, we understand their pain points, we understand their idiosyncrasies and the differences in the way they learn, because their learning journeys may be slightly different. That is how we can now personalize their learning in an appropriate way. That is to complement what you're saying, that as we want to do that, there are other little things we can do to understand the learner much better. Just like you need to understand the customer better, understand what is called the customer journey, do a customer journey map. The same way you can do a student journey map, in order to understand, okay, this set of students, they have maybe 5 representative personas, 5 different ways that characterize them. Therefore, when I'm designing the curricula to teach them, I am sensitive of that so that I can personalize their learning. This is fantastic contribution that you just reminded me. Okay, is somebody saying something there?
Yeah, just to add a little bit to Adebola Ojo has said. From my experience, I teach a subject I really love a lot, that is business management. And I found out that bringing real life situation to students make them understand quite easily, quite quickly, whatever you are teaching in business. So I've tried this over and over again. I found that teaching them something, generally from the textbook and from whatever the curriculum has said for the week, teaching them things there without bringing the real life situation to them makes no sense to them, really, because they will always sit and think these are postgraduate students, because they will always sit down there and think that whatever they are learning is somewhere else, not something they are experiencing. But once you bring something to life, it just drops like light for them.
Yeah.
So over time now, I have experimented with real life situations, and that really brings us to the fact that we need to always update ourselves with what is going on around us in the world when we bring them to the class, to the students. You don't really need to teach them much, but they already know and they take it from there. So real life situations are really, really good because students make decisions, even see things for themselves and then talk about it themselves. So it does help them to be part of what is going on and find solutions to what is happening.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I mean, we are really, really blessed that all of us are knee deep into pedagogics. Dr. Maka is actually the curriculum lead in business management at University of Sheffield International College. Of course, Adebola is the head of teaching and learning in Lincoln. And recently, if I should actually reveal, he has brought the entire geography to make top marks in student assessments. They are on the very top mark in student assessments. So, and that is because of his depth. And I have to say that we've been working on these ideas since almost 15 years now, both of us. And of course, we apply them slightly in our own different phase, but we work on these ideas almost every time. And I want to now recognize Okechukwu first, then after that, Professor Henry to make.
Thank you so much, Professor Patrick. I was just going to ask a question.
Okay.
For those of us that teach entrepreneurship, can one say that your bonnet lifting analogy is akin to innovation and accelerator hubs?
That's what it is. That's exactly. That's what it is. All these things are principles, but how you do them in different areas. It has to be adapted. The important thing is to remember to do them, because that's the problem is one not doing them. We don't do them. Therefore, the students are actually shortchanged. Really, even to add to your own case, I will always like to use 7 E's to teach students about entrepreneurship, because when you teach students entrepreneurship without the linkages with all the E's that make the student an effective entrepreneur, then actually speaking, you might be succeeding at a certain level, but it's not integrally working. Because the 7 E's must come in: the expertise, the experience, the entrepreneurship, the enterprise development, the real building of the businesses itself, then the emotional intelligence, then the execution. All this must happen. This is why, and that is again coming back to the carbonate example. It's always better to do those things that way. So I want to talk about that later. Professor Henry, please.
Okay, thank you so much. I mean, it's been wonderful listening to everybody. I want to look at the African context.
Yeah.
Specifically the Nigerian context.
Yes.
At what level in the curriculum development will the informal sector be captured? If you look at the normal school system in Nigeria, everybody is practically forced to obtain a certificate.
Yes.
Now, the people that don't have this kind of resources, money to pay, may actually be as intelligent or even more intelligent, but because they are constrained, so they go to the, informal sector, and for instance, become mechanics or shop, retailers and all that. Yes. But apprenticeship is actually a form of mentorship, which ordinarily is why at certain stages in the school system, they insist that people go back to industry to get experiences and come back to school, what they call a one-year IT. So at what point in curriculum, especially at the undergraduate level, can we really integrate these people? Because we're talking about problem solving. We are talking about culturally sensitive educational system.
Yeah.
There is no illiterate in a GEM, not because everybody is formally read, but because everybody is integrated into that system as a technologist from beginning. So it mops up unemployment. It gives people to function at certain cadre. When they created the polytechnic system, the idea was to create that middle level manpower, whereby the non-pure academics can actually be very proficient in technological advancement and practices. But what has happened is over diluted. And in fact, they have even, I think the Senate, the National Assembly just passed the bill, equating HND to test decree and all those kind of, analogies. Approximations. So it's making a whole, a total, it doesn't make sense again that you have a polytechnic, which is a technological sector that's supposed to be practice-driven. So these people there are so many programs in Nigeria. The MDE program, for instance, national employment, whatever, that normally pick up people, train them on tools, train them on life-saving skills, and then allow them to function independently. So if we are designing a curriculum that is sensitive to our setting, we must not forget this informal sector. We must not forget the apprenticeship. We must not forget the mentorship that is, our traditional system of education, because it is actually education, but, in a different form. So the overemphasis on the Western education and the certificate is actually the cause of the gap between the shelf and the community.
This is a wonderful insight, but let me even come into that briefly, because, even in UK here, they used to say Department for Education and Skills. That's the way they've been characterized. I think they just recently said education, DFE, but they have always emphasized skills. And their colleges are really doing what those colleges were designed to do, covering those skills. But what I'm even saying in Africa is we all have to learn those skills together with the theories in universities, polytechnic. The skills must be seriously embedded in the teaching. This is why we created the SSGS Academy, the skills for students, graduates, and startups, because that is the arrowhead for bringing those people together. When you join it up with 7 E's, then all the artisans, all the people that are materially intelligent, but maybe they don't have the resources to go through formal education, are benefiting from the 7 E's, because somebody that's a trader on a main market, for instance, can understand he's already running a business. So his business, even if he didn't start going to register it formally with the Nigerian Corporate Affairs Commission, his business and his shed in Onitsha is feeding his family. He's already running a business. But sometimes he may not be very efficient. He may be making money because he's smart, but he may not be managing it well. He could have even succeed more if he's exposed to a bit of the 7 E's, and he can now come into universities that are properly teaching skills as well, to learn those skills during sandwich, during holidays, during weekends, so that there's a linkage between higher educational institutions and the informal sector. In that way, there's a lot of skills development going on, apprenticeships. Dr. Ojo and I did apprenticeship. We had apprenticeship, of course, we call them interns, from the University of Sheffield. They gave us a couple of students to mentor and to work on Afro-Hero projects to learn skills. And these are MSc students in social sciences. And of course, we've continued to mentor other skills and bring other people into mentorship, bring other people into internship and apprenticeship. There's a serious amount of apprenticeship going on with the people I work with. They're almost like my apprentices. I coach them on business development, And I even have platforms that are devoted to teaching skills, especially this one I mentioned at SSGS. But I have another one called Glotres, a lot of them. Even on my main platform, Sigma Z, I'm coaching statisticians and analysts on it. Some of them are enrolling for training to learn practically. This is a big missing gap. All the SMEs in Nigeria, they need to be brought into training. They need to know that they can go and receive additional training and support on these skills. We need to do this. So the informal sector, SMEs are very important, and we're not doing it well enough. Yet we are professors of entrepreneurship, we are professors of we're professors of business. What is our impact in society? Nothing. We're just there collecting salaries. So Larry said, most of those people must be generating more than they actually paid. And it's true. They should, but they're not. They're even collecting money from, overtaxing students, and things like that. They shouldn't do that. Because if they wanted to really survive financially, they should use their skills the right way. And so he brought a very sensitive matter here. And we can continue with that on even off this platform, because it's a very key. The entire reason we set up the SSGS is just about that, about exactly what you said now. Somebody else is raising his hand, I think, and that's Adiwola Ojo. Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Actually, I wanted to talk about on the issue of teaching. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yes. You see, when I was president of African Maths Union, I started what was called the Discovery Program, Discovery in teaching maths at secondary level, in which we insisted that teachers should no longer quote formula. You know, the way we were taught circle in those days, formula of circle and so on. You can teach all of the curriculum now in secondary school without quoting a single formula to the student.
Exactly.
Discovery first make them see the need to use that concept. They must see how that concept they want to learn impact their lives. Then they become interested because they will now discover. And then the process, you make them go through the process so they know how to actually derive those formulas. They understand the approach, and so they don't have to quote, they don't have to memorize because they know how to do it.
Fantastic.
So that is now what we're also saying, let's do at the university level.
Yes, exactly.
Real analysis. There's no need to quote, to cram, give me an epsilon greater than 0. You can find a delta such that the epsilon is the modulus of epsilon f of x minus epsilon and so on. You know, which was the way we were taught.
Yes.
Now, let the student know the concept of limits and accumulation points, and know it from what if you look at a university system, campus, what is the accumulation point there? What's the idea of accumulation point? That's where within a certain radius, you can find most of the students. Only
exactly.
In that. So, you know, that's why I told some students, I said, okay, now, continuity and removable continuity. What does it mean in the industry? If I mean, in terms of shifts and so on in manufacturing something. So this is the thing. Let them first know those concepts, discover, you know, how it works, you know, why they need the concept. Then it will become easy for them and it become part of them. So this is the dimension that I want to bring into pedagogy.
Thank you so much, Prof. In short, just what I'm going to recognize Adebolo Ojo, but let me just add to this. When I was immediately after my secondary school training, and I was waiting to go to uni, and a lot of people came for me to teach them mathematics. How did I teach them about the radius, about the formula for circumference of a circle, or formula for the area of a circle? I got different cans with different diameters and told them to measure. When they measured and everything, then we plotted the circumference we measured on those cans against the diameter, and they found that there's a straight line, the gradient of which is the pi or the 2 pi. They were shocked. So they now, instead of telling them to cram the formula that C, of course, is an easy formula, that circumference is equal to 2 pi r, they now knew where it came from, which is exactly what Professor Sholare was talking about. If we're able to throw away getting them to memorize it, but to discover those constants, to discover those things themselves in practice, they will never forget that thing. And that is the things we need to be doing. Discovery-based learning. Discover the process that leads to something instead of memorizing something that you can easily forget after examinations. I don't want to take too much space because I want to recognize. I don't know who has spoken before. Is that okay? Ojo, briefly, then and then we can wrap up this part. We are doing very well. You know, it's a very stimulating discussion, honestly.
Thank you very much, Prof.
Dr. Ojo, yes.
I think much of what I wanted to say has already been said. I think this is a very important point raised by Professor Rochukwu. And, you know, I just wanted to add one or two things. One is that there must be a very, very, we must acknowledge that the vocational sector as a source of skills development in its own right. I think that is important. We have to find a way, ensure that it is acknowledged as a source. Then secondly, the second point I want to make is that it is important to give young people a voice. give young people a voice in the debate on the job market access and activity creation.
Yep.
I mean, that is another kettle of fish on its own. But I just wanted to make those 2 points as additional points to.
Thank you so much. So we are talking about youth and students being, and that is why if we are using user research to study their needs, their pain points, and we can now come and say we have understood these things, let's work together to create a way you people can benefit. And that is the idea. Everything is coming around, I think in this part, a lot of things emerged. The last bullet point on this part, the plenary, because we've done a lot of interactive discussions. We covered a lot of things about the need to practicalize the teaching and learning in different fields. There was an example from Professor Sholari that talks about how to teach something as abstract as group theory through gamification. Of course, that concept came back from Ojo actually. The fact that he could use Rubik Cube to gamify the understanding of group theory, as abstract as that field is so compelling. And this is even at master's level, showing exactly what we've been saying, that there's no field in the world that cannot be professionalized and practicalized if we think deeply about doing it. Then we also understood that I added, because maybe out of his humility he didn't want to mention that he has been using those type of constructs to train gifted children. Majority of them have been going to Harvard, going to top universities in UK and Germany. Children that are prodigious. He has a way of using these practice-based approaches to teach them, and they understand very, very abstract concepts and run with it. One of them has been I remember in MIT. So a lot of them. And this is what we are saying. Why can't we do more of this? Then it was also mentioned that it's important to be flexible in terms of approach in incorporating different pedagogies. That was Dr. Ojo reminding us that this must happen. And then he talked about student-centered, reward-centered, personalized learning, which combines synchronous and asynchronous gamification, and also the need that we should also be updating ourselves from time to time. Of course, we also covered things like blended learning. I talk about student journey maps, just like you normally do customer journey maps in business. You also have your student journey map, because students are to some extent equivalents of the customers, and the business is education, something like that. So those analogies hold. So you can borrow from those constructs and enrich your pedagogy by the way you teach them, and so on and so forth. Blended learning, hybrid approaches, and then Dr. Maka came in with, reinforcements on how she uses teaching cases. She didn't mention that, but I know her work, to, drive home the understanding of concepts in business and management. And that is cases she picks from real life situations and then rewrites them in a way that uses some frameworks to deliver understanding to the students. And then we also covered things like one central plank that was raised by Professor Rochukwu was on the link between all these things we're doing and the informal sector. He mentioned that the way things have developed is as if we are no longer realizing the importance of and purpose of the polytechnics in Nigeria, for instance. So that the vocational education, which should on its right be a fantastic and highly respected development, is no longer being reckoned. Everybody is now struggling to become a university, when actually, as we have seen, the universities are not doing enough to support the economy. So again, I mentioned that is exactly what we are doing in the skills for students, graduates, and the startups academy that we are running. All of us are involved in it, luckily, and a few other people that just joined. And then, of course, I talked about the 7 E's that can also galvanize those skills across the entire informal sector. Taking example of maybe people trading, on the main market. Of course, there are many of those people, Balogu, Ariari, and Aba, and others. And then these are the things. And then, of course, it came together in the sense that we talked about also apprenticeships that we run in AfriHero, mentorship that we also do for training the younger professionals and academics that we work with, and so on and so forth, which is middle-level manpower development, which was being mentioned by Professor Orochukwu. One thing that came up again was the need for a discovery-based approach to teach, for teaching anything, completely making the memorization of formulae unnecessary. That was from Sholari, and he gave a good example of that. And I also offered an example from just the basic things about the area and the circumference of a circle. And then, of course, Sholari added again the idea of teaching even what looked like very abstract concepts in functional analysis, concept for limits, accumulation points, and applying them to industry sector where maybe a point of discontinuity, removable, it may be when there is a shift. When workers are having a shift, there is a kind of an interregnum, and that is almost like a discontinuity in mathematics. These are the kind of things that students will easily relate with. Are we doing more of this enough? We are not. If only a few people do it, then it's not going to move to shift the needle in pedagogy in that continent. And there's a lot of things there. And then Ojo came back with talking about the vocational, again, education being recognized in its own right. And the truth is that those are the guys that actually have the money anyway. Majority of the people that are not doing the vocation are relying on just salaries monthly. These people, if they do well, they make money far more, which is even important for survival in life. You know, look at the cabinet makers, the people that, the plumbers, we pay through ANOSIS here in UK. To get those people. Sometimes their diaries are so full that you have to wait almost a month before the one you really want to come and do something for you will come and do it. And they will still, you have to pay calling out charge, you still pay them for the hours they stay. They are comfortable. You see, so a country that recognizes the importance of all these fields, this vocational training, will actually be surviving. And we'll talk about the voice of the young and in the design of their learning and education and training, through also user research. So that is the coming together of the part 2 of this program. And I want to thank you so much for all the points you made. As we move quickly into now, we have about roughly 35 minutes to get through this. But what is happening today is that it's a more in-depth exploration of the constructs. And I knew that this is what will happen when we bring experts that are very good in what they're doing together. And I thank all the experts, all the facilitators again for this level of contribution, and every one of us that are here contributing. Thank you so much. I'm moving to part 3 now. In this part, we are looking at the 7 fold-ways and the cure helix, meaning the question we are addressing here is for academics, for instance, what are the 7-fold or even 8-fold ways they can unleash the innovations we are talking about in the riot spheres, the research, the integration of knowledge, the applications and their teaching, to have more impact in society, to also enable them to have what I call just fancifully a big bang impact, technically and financially. That is where they are producing things, producing applicable knowledge, and also ensuring more financial support. In the part also, we are going to think about how to rebalance the priorities of the professorate, meaning how do we, because of these lacks we've been looking at, how do we reappraise the way African and developing academics from developing countries in Africa can actually be scored in terms of their ranking, in terms of their promotions, to be able to afford these things in a better way. Our thinking is, if we can actually understand the 7-fold ways very well, it becomes a kind of a mechanism for academics to start really becoming corporate enough. That's exactly what I'm looking at. And then, of course, we take it apart, and then we come in and discuss it again from our perspectives, and then we pull it together. Let me just show those 7 ways as a list. An academic that wants to do all these things we are saying, to operationalize our thinking today, should be able to act in these ways. There should be a department in his life that is focused on student services. Of course, that's our main thing in teaching teaching students research, teaching them knowledge, teaching them how to use knowledge together, how to apply and things like that. But he has to have links with other institutions in the world so that his knowledge is enriched. Okay? That is affiliated HEIs. There are specific services he must be rendering to them. He has to have relationship with colleagues, global academic and industry players, and that is again the idea of the quadruple helix. Client services, he has to be running a business of his discipline, the business of history, the business of mathematics, the business of statistics, so that people can request services from them, research and consulting. People can request their support in developing their products and services, and so on and so forth, within the remit of their disciplines, especially for those problems that their disciplines can address, something like that. So having clients outside the four walls of the university is very important, because that is what brings in that outside in perspective, isn't it? The examples that come from the consulting table that students can relate better with. They have to be able to work with governments. All the departments, some departments and ministries and agencies in government that can use the knowledge they produce. It doesn't have to be all of them, but can use the knowledge of it. If you are a statistician and economist, you can look at, are there problems in the central bank or in the banking and financial industry that your models can help to solve, or existing solutions that can be improved? Those are the kind of things. If they are asking those questions more and more across the Q helix, then it is much better. But they're not always doing that, because they are not incentivized to ask those questions. The short, it was even mentioned that sometimes government does not even understand what to request of those academics. Or even ministries may not even understand the best thing to request of the professionals working in those ministries. So you find everybody coming, at the end of the month, everybody collects a salary. What is the impact on the national productivity? Not much. So countries have to keep borrowing money to sustain their economies. And servicing the interests on those loans is killing, because the entire workforce is not producing anything meaningful. It's a very sorry state to be in. Then, whether you're academic or professional, you must have global partners, understand the way global organizations work, because they are the custodians of some of the resources in the world. They are also the managers of global problems. So knowing their modus operandi is very important, so that you can grab some projects from them to bring income to your institutions, whether this is UNESCO, World Health Organization, World Bank, African Development Bank Group, USAID, the UK Department for International Development, this like that. In 2008, we secured a little grant from the British Council to set up the Nigerian Mathematics, Finance, Statistics, Economic and Research Consortium, which is operational today. So we did a lot of conferences that were supported by that particular consortium. Sholari and I and Nikagwera and others. This is the way we need to operate. And then professional bodies. Every academic, for instance, should be able to be active or relate well with professional bodies that cover the work they do. So if I'm a statistician, Nigerian Statistical Association, for instance, a banker, Nigerian Institute of Bankers, a financial investment expert, chartered financial analysts, and so on and so forth. Every field has a kind of society. In as much as we are not saying that the professional agenda must completely drive the academic game, but there must be a coming together, so that the person that is training as an academic will also eventually be able to function as a professional by mastering the standards of those professions. You cannot be a hospital consultant if you just read medicine. You have to be reading the medicine, but there are professional codes of conduct you must actually sign up to. If you are not keeping them, your license is withdrawn. So you must understand how to interface with those professional skills and standards. That's very important. So these are the things. But if you want to show it in more detail, that is how it looks. Let me explain it a bit more. So since I've mentioned them, you can see that the corporate academic is at the center of all this. That's the corporate academic there in this big black kind of stuff. And there are interacting arrows that is moving into those 7 ways. Let's take just one example of them. We may not go into all of them, just to show you. Look at student services. There are a lot of things you have to do for that. One of them is exemplary research supervision. Do we supervise these students very well? Do we even understand the best way to supervise a student? Having shown that the research methods canvas, which should be a support for that many people are not using that one. They're using the other one, which stops with 3 criteria. If we use that one, therefore, are we not reproducing our own inadequacies in the student? Because they may not know the remaining 4 criteria, for instance. Therefore, they may not be at the top of their game in the corporate world. You see? So this is the idea. So when we say exemplary research, that's what we mean. And we call it a career wheel or hub and spoke model, because it's almost like the hub and spoke of a bicycle tire or motorcycle tire, something like that. Then we have to talk about stellar cost notes. The stellar cost notes must accommodate not just those technical constructs, but the 7 E's. My notes have 7 E's in it. So when I'm teaching a topic, I may be playing some of the E's. I teach another topic, some of the E's are more, I am simply flexing the E's in and out. And by the time I take a student through maybe a course like data analytics and business and data analytics, the person has mastered the techniques of that field, but also masters how to function as a 7E expert in using those knowledge. I have never seen this thing I'm talking about in any university, not even Harvard. They do their own thing, of course, because they are not bringing it together the way we are talking about. It is how you bring it together. We are not originators of some of the constructs, but we pull it together. We put the E's together to make sense. And then we weave it into the technical teaching of the disciplines. That is where the difference lies. Then you talk about the transfer of innovation, knowledge, skills, and attitudes, which comes again from the SSGS Academy, suggesting that some of the things that we cannot cover within very congested technical curricula in a university should be taught outside through other platforms. And those platforms must be managed by those academies themselves. Some of them, those teaching can happen during summer, for instance, during weekends, in order to boost the capacity of that student to function in society. Developing leading textbooks and research monographs and so on and so forth. Research seminars, and we are doing most of this anyway. But it is the manner we do it that I'm talking about. It's not ticking the box, it's doing it in this other way I'm talking about, bringing in all those extra skills, layering it, flexing it, improving it. And then let me take just one more. Let's take client services. Client services here, you talk about contract research and consulting services. Very important. Very important. You know, in the first month of arriving in CCU, we secured a grant from the African Research Center for $15,000 on COVID-related matter. What are we studying? The role of the private sector in public health supply chain management in Enugu State. The 2 investigators are Professor Henry and myself. Bringing our knowledge together. His knowledge of public health, his knowledge of medical field as a professor of medicine, professor of public health, professor of nutritional biochemistry, in which he's currently characterizing different food crops in Africa and Nigeria, was brought together with my own knowledge of statistics, my own knowledge of user research, to provide a compelling, if I can say so, at the risk of being immodest, masterful, research that covers almost every spectrum of translation of knowledge to improve the medical practice, the supply chain situation in Enugu State. We are still on it. So, and these are the things I'm talking about. If we are not able to know how to get those contracts, how to create the proposals that can address challenges, who is going to give us the money? Now, you can imagine a university where maybe there are 400 academics, and you manage to train 100 of them to know the skills. That university will no longer lack money any longer, because the 100 will be minting money for the institution, but you have to reward them well because they are rainmakers. The problem is they bring the money, you see the people at the top playing politics, discouraging these stars from really bringing, and then all of them can say, either I want to resign, there no free hand. That is why a lot of bureaucracies, if Sholari was talking about, you need to allow this type of people to be the center point of the university system. because they are the people that are bringing in skills, bringing in the revenue to be able to support all the work going on. Where if you don't do that, the government money does not suffice and things like that. So those are, again, apart from the contract teaching and research, you have to think about teaching company services so that when you go into companies, you educate the companies with the research you're doing about the best ways they can do something. That's how they say, oh, we want to retain you as a consultant. Now, all the work you're doing for them, once you agree confidentialities and how to use it, they allow you to use it anonymously to drive your student teaching as well. Your research of supervision in your postgraduate, even some of the problems they are solving for them, can become the master's topics, can become the PhD topics. And they can even decide to sponsor. One of my students that did something on strategic marketing using statistical models was from a big UK insurance company. And they gave a scholarship to study under me to build a model for them, which they are using. I was shocked that when we finished that research, one day he came and said to me, please, Doc, can I have your bank account? I said, why are you taking my bank account? I'm not supposed to be paid by you. I'm a university staff. It's part of my duty. I'm paid salary every month. He said, no. The company said that the work we did was so good that they want to give me an honorarium. Who am I not to say no? Dr. Ojo knew about it because he knew the student. They paid £3,000 into my account for a stellar PhD supervision because we solved an important problem for them. I'm sure that model we built for them could have given them not less than £2-3 million profit. So they just tossed 3,000 my way. And that, to me, is the kind of example we're talking about, that academics can do this. Professionals can extend themselves by doing this type of things as well. Service excellence, and with meticulous attention to the client needs, using user research and things like a lot of other ones. All those things, all those little bullet points, when I counted them, there are 33 different things academics can be doing to become global corporate academics. The academics that mint money for their institutions. Yet publish the best papers. Because if you see more, you write more. If you are doing this, you see far more than the guy in the classroom. Of course. Therefore, even your papers are far more cogent. I wrote a paper with Dr. Joe that is looking at Boko Haram, terrorism. Why? Because we have that insight on how to use statistical and geographical models to be able to look at the heat maps and the kind of things, the areas that they are impacting in the country, which can link into advice for security organizations, advice for police, advice for... Do you see the point I'm making? If we are not able to articulate that level of connection between our fields and that problem in society, how can we write that paper? And these are the little examples that we are talking about, and so on and so forth. So that's the sevenfold way. When I wanted to add, another thing I wanted to add there is that there is the one we call the threefold way of the academic, meaning as a lecturer, as a teacher, as a researcher, as a service. You can also see the different things they do. They still have their own small bullet points. It doesn't matter the number of them, but when I looked at this, it is just a list. It is not serving somebody they call a client, somebody they call a customer. The other model does it. The other model is telling you these are clients, these are student services, so that the concept of service and providing value is upmost in your mind. These ones are doing it as what we must do, which is a little bit too literate. It's not that motivating, and this is the difference between both. Okay, so let us open up this part to quick, because I'm conscious of our time. Well, because we're almost reaching time now. We'll just move quick on this part if we need to articulate that this part. How do we bring it together, therefore, in repositioning the promotion of academics to senior positions? But let's have a little bit of window for any interactions on this. If not, then I can just wrap it up and we'll go to part 4. Okay? So in this part, what we've covered, basically, the fact that if academics can really understand the sevenfold ways, then academics themselves will realize that you have to do the academic game both inside and outside the classroom. And if you are doing that, you are just a corporate academic. It's not a big concept. It's just the way you work. We say you are global on top of that if you go beyond your country to do work that is global using the same principles. So it's not a very challenging thing to move from being a corporate academic to being a global corporate academic. The one that you need a little bit of more training is the one we call which is the acme of corporate academicism, is the one when you're a platform global corporate academic, the one that has digital systems built that can actually mobilize the kind of things you're doing at scale, so that you're no longer doing it only as just part of my university or my department. You're doing it really at scale. You have to have your own digital platform, or even if it's one website that is powerful, that moves your ideas to the world, then you become a platform global corporate academic. So my thinking about number 2 point there is that there has to be a need for us to now go back to those RIAT and reduce the loading we are giving to just publications and say, give enough weight to all of them so that academics know that they must do well enough in almost all of them in order to get promoted to senior positions. And I said before, it does not mean that they publish less, no, only that you are giving enough scores to the other aspects, because those are the ones that actually hit society and so on and so forth. That is how we are thinking about rebalancing those priorities. There's a lot of notes we can put on that later on that we can release to those that attended. And then, of course, that is my bringing together of part 3 for now. I want us to go to part 4. Okay, in this part, actually, this part is again bringing things together. It talks about, okay, how do we really become global corporate academics and global change masters? Because change masters is just a way of saying the same game that academics play to be globally corporate, globally recognized. Professionals also do that. But all of them can be called global change masters. Okay. And then for academics, one can say they are called global corporate academics. In effect, we want to think about how traditional academics can become global corporate, and we've already covered that. We say that they have to operate the 7 E's, more importantly, the 7 ways. There is also what is called the 5 forces, which I'm going to introduce quickly now. The 5 forces is nothing but a set of principles that energize the 7-fold ways in order to move the academic towards global visibility. Because if those 5 forces are not marshaled, he struggles, to be globally recognized, and that's the problem. And there are a lot of powerful academics that we know in their fields have left the world unsung heroes, if one can say that, because that's what really happens. Their work is only in their tiny area, all their publications are in it, not everybody reads it, and so on and so forth. Not that it's not important. Some of them even got patents that are changing the world after their, posthumously. But important thing that when they were in the world, they were not really as impactful as they could have been if they understood these processes. So one of the ideas we are talking about in this case is that for traditional academics are not as endowed as corporate academics in doing stuff. They're good in writing stuff most of the time, but they need to be equally good in doing stuff. And that is what all of us have been saying, Sholari, Orochukwu, all of us have been talking about, being able to do things again. And then, of course, in terms of the 5 forces, there are one of them is the philosophy called CARET philosophy, the corporate academic research and enterprise development philosophy. That is the philosophy that says that you must play the 7 E's always, almost always, when you are interpreting findings into the world. My expression is interpreting findings into the world, mobilizing research knowledge into the world. You need to play a philosophy that says that knowledge that I acquire must be transformed into something usable. It doesn't have to be a product like a widget. It can be a framework that does something better. It can be a patent that says, I have developed a formula for a drug, for instance. So it can be a service, like student services we talk about, like client services we talk about in 7 ways, all those things. But are you making sure that research goes to that level? Again, it goes back to the research methods canvas. It goes back to the 7 criteria in the ladder of contribution to knowledge. Stop playing only the 3, play the 7. That's exactly what we're talking about. Riot excellence is all we've been talking about. Being excellent in the 4 means you can create grants from all of them. I got 20,000 worth of grants only in teaching in my former university. Only on teaching, pedagogy, not research. Research is done through my PhD students. I had several of them. So research money comes from the PhD fees. And most of them are paid by Nigerian government or other countries that are, paying scholarships for their PhD. Libyans, by then Gaddafi was there. Even now, they are giving scholarship to their, even they pay for husband, wife if they want to do PhDs, and they pay stipend to their children. So I got a lot of those students. Money was coming on research that way. I never even needed to write too much grant for research as well, because the student monies, the student fees, each of them paying about £15,000 a year across 10 students. Is it not £150,000 I've already made without lifting a penny to write any proposal, other than that I gave a topic and developed it with them, something like that. We don't know. These are the things we need to know about. You write 10 grants, you get only one, but the guy that has the PhD, the money is flowing in completely. When the university takes 36% overhead, the rest is for you to manage with your students to make sure they get all they need. So we need to talk about that carry philosophy. We don't have it. It's not endemic in the Nigerian system. That's why academics are not really producing enough value, because they are not realizing that there is an imperative to translate their knowledge to products and services. Then in terms of the SSGS Academy, meaning one of the third force there is those skills we are developing in this academy. All the skills we are talking about, the 7 E's, the 5 minds for the future, all of them are part of this. And then we talk about the IBMT strategizer, the integrated business model for producing goods and services from active research. That's another layer of work altogether. We covered that in a PhD thesis supervised to 2019, which supersedes the current model for business modeling, which is called the Business Model Canvas by Osterpolder and Pigel 2012. So the 2019 model of business model that we developed is currently the best in the world at the moment. So these are the things we're talking about. And then you need to understand and master user-centered research so you can design things that users can find useful, and so on and so forth. And then we need to be able to master the Kyo helix, because we need to understand how to move knowledge across those boundaries, and so on and so forth. And that's exactly what we need to. The other thing I want to talk about is, this is where I described the 4 forces, but I'm not going to go through it again, because I've just talked about this slide now, but I'm going to send all these things to all of us at some point. Okay. Now, let me just mention that when we say producing, something that supports goods and services, I said before, it can be frameworks. Just look at this last bullet point. It can be frameworks and toolkits for habitually creating wealth, job opportunities, enterprises from your right engagement. It can be a template, for instance. Research Methods Canvas, for instance, should be there to help you to formulate better research that has up to 7 criteria of excellence instead of 3, and so on and so forth. Then we talked about there are other things we need to do. I just left it there. There is what we covered in last workshop is 15 laws of success. These are the laws. You must have an aim in life that is bigger than just your technical area. Because if your aim is only your technical area, is too narrow. It's too narrow to move the world. And that's the problem. You need to go slightly above your technical area to have that aim. Every other thing is known, whether it's self-control or anything. I just will share at some point or talk about the vision. My own vision that supports the definitive aim is to transform and globalize, to transform and democratize global education and change, meaning to create innovative models and systems for researching, for teaching, for integrating knowledge, for applications that are best in the world, and to throw it to the world at ridiculously low fees, so that all those people like in Ivy League universities or UK group or universities in the developed world who are selling courses at atrocious prices that people from developing countries cannot even afford will be taken out of business. That's exactly what it is. The model of Osilox is to go in wherever there's injustice in the world, take it out. They're creating something better than what exists. I have systems today, by the grace of God, that supersedes most of the systems that currently exist. It took me years to do, from 2005, starting with Sholari, starting with Bola, starting with Professor Udo. We created some of these things from 2005. So let me just summarize by saying the vision of what we are doing. The vision is this. I've just said it now. Transforming and globalizing is just a mini vision. The real vision is to live a spirit-based, project-based life, transforming and democratizing global education and change by upskilling people, creating wealth, jobs, opportunities, products, services, peace, joy, happiness, and prosperity for the world, and publishing them through multiple channels across academia, industry, government, and wider society. All of these other laws of success you are seeing are attitudes that need to go with this ability. Because you must have self-control to do these things. You must understand the habit of doing more than you are paid for. You must have a pleasant personality to move things around, to be able to have networks. You must have power of concentration, ability to cooperate with people, ability to understand there's nothing like failure, but any failure is an interim step to success, something like that, and so on and so forth. And understanding the golden rule, you must do unto others as you expect others to do unto you, and so on and so forth. And then there is also what is called the 32 habits of highly creative people. You can see all of them. Sensitivity to context, which of course has been mentioned, isn't it, by Professor Orochukwu and others. Not being motivated by money. I never work for money. I work for quality, and money follows. Sense of destiny. You can synthesize and see the big picture and other things. These are the things we talk about that can complement your game as a corporate academic. And then, of course, there is also a lot of skills with employability, which is related to what we've talked about in terms of the skills for creativity, and so on and so forth. Then, of course, basic work skills and 7 E's, of course, listed here as well. And we now bring it up together. We are almost dead on time, 3 minutes to go. And then all we are saying, therefore, is, in summary, that to become global corporate academics, we simply need to understand how to move the knowledge we are developing in research, in teaching, integration of knowledge, applications to the world across academia. So within the university, doing that thing well in terms of our theory, research, and practice. But outside the university or outside the higher education institution, doing it in applying it in industry, in supporting government departments, in wider society, understanding global challenges, understanding, for instance, the 2030 UN strategic sustainable development goals, the 17 elements of it, including poverty eradication, for instance, water and all those things, sanitation, good education, all of them. And asking yourself, how does my discipline contribute? Therefore, can I create projects that can address these problems? And so on and so forth. And that is simple. That is exactly the message. But of course, to have motivating principles than forces that can enable you to accelerate that game. And that is where I bring it to the end today. Any questions or further remarks before we close? If there are no questions, I would just want to end with a remark about thanking the facilitators again. Okay. So what I would do now is to recognize that we've got a lot of support from our facilitators, Professor Sholari, Distinguished Professor of Mathematics, UNESCO Distinguished Professor of Mathematical Sciences, who actually has been a mentor to me at the beginning of our collaboration, right from 2008. Sholari has made a lot of impact in my life, and we've worked together a lot. Professor Henry Olochukwu has always been with me since we joined CCU together, and we've been working on this South African project and looking at other projects that come from combining our disciplines. I want to thank also Professor Andy Madiche, who is not here, but who has always been hard working on the platform of the SSGS Academy, helping to set it up, helping to also drive it. I want to thank Okechukwu. I want to thank Professor Odo, who of course inadvertently has to go to another meeting he's central to, but he started working with me again around 2012, 10, when we supervised a PhD together. He's known to Ade, he's known to, with himself and myself and Professor Sholari have always met in Afri-Hero Research Methods events, for many years. And of course, I want to thank everybody, Dr. Maka Meto, who has been the coordinating the SSGS platform in terms of our Google Docs and other technologies that are involved. I want to thank the ICT team, for instance, Janet and Claire, who are my colleagues from CCU that are supporting the ICT part of what we do sometimes, and they're very good in what they're doing. I want to thank also, if you Benabo, who is, of course, my niece, but has been a senior player in organizing the executive team that devises and runs and structures projects that we are running on. So many people, okay, Chuku, for instance, from CCU, who's been working again on the platform, raising a lot of ideas on entrepreneurship. In short, my thanks go to everybody, and I wish you very well in the future and all you do. And I hope you respond to our call for support anytime we have something that connects with your discipline. I want to thank as well every other member of the SSGS Academy. We're almost about 40 now. Not everybody came because, of course, we know the challenges of weekends and other things. But we hope that this grows. And we thank God again for being supporting us and giving us good ideas to make sure that we are succeeding in changing the nature of knowledge making in the world, especially aimed at emancipating Nigeria, developing countries in Africa. Thank you so much for coming again, and God bless you.